Hello, and welcome to the pre-departure orientation for the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences Study Abroad programs. Congratulations on your acceptance to study abroad. In this presentation, we'll just be going over some logistical information moving forward about secondary applications, finances. We'll also discuss transferring credit and some other important topics. So let's go ahead and get started. Just as an introduction, I'm sure you've all been to our website, global.tulane.edu at this point to apply to study abroad, but also be aware that this website has some really useful features on it for you. We have pages for prospective students, current students, and return students. We also have FAQs for yourself and your parents, pages on finances, on transferring credit when you get back from abroad. So this is a really good resource and a first stop for you for any questions that you might have. You can also follow us on Instagram or on Facebook for updates on events that we might be doing when you get back to study abroad, ways to get involved on campus, that kind of thing. So by now you should all have received your notification letter approving you to study abroad from Tulane. So again, congratulations on that. And really the most important element of this notification letter is the instruction to submit your secondary application. Students who do not have a secondary application have already been informed. In general, this is going to be DIS programs in Copenhagen and Stockholm, which have interviews instead of an actual application. Our EDUCO program, or Sciences Po in Paris, Madrid Reunidas at Complutense, and the BCSP Bologna program. So all of those do not have secondary applications, but otherwise you can assume or operate under the assumption that your program does have another application that you need to complete. Generally, this is going to be found on the website of the host university or program provider, and be aware that deadlines and application requirements may differ from Tulane's. So this is your responsibility to know when the deadlines are, to know what the requirements are. If you do have any questions about your secondary application, you can, of course, reach out to our office, but generally the best place for information is going to be to reach out to the program provider or the university directly. So whoever your contact is, if you need help getting in touch with the university, just let us know. Another important element of your notification letter are your post-decision documents. So these first two, the emergency contact information, and changing your status from Tulane approved to committed, which lets us know that you do intend to go abroad now that you've been accepted. Those would be completed by October 15th at the latest. If you have not done those at this time, please go ahead and do that now. As soon as you've made your arrangements, go ahead and input your travel information. That would be your flight itinerary, just letting us know where you're going to be and when. Again, this does not have to be done by the 15th, but you should just do it as soon as you have made those arrangements. OSA scholarship notification, if you did check on your initial application that you were interested in applying for scholarships and that you allowed us to look at your financial information, then you are in consideration for those scholarships. We won't be hearing back from financial aid until late October, so more than likely notifications on those will go out beginning of November. So before you go, just some basic academic points to remember. Remember that you should meet with your academic and major advisors to discuss fulfilling major, minor, or core credits while you're abroad. So for your major or minor, this would be your advisor within that department or the department head that you would meet with to discuss pre-approval. In the case of core requirements like your non-Western or a fine art, that would be academic advising. If you do not take this extra step, otherwise everything just comes back as a general elective credit at the 5,000 level. But if you do want credit towards a major, minor, or a core, you can do that. You just have to get approval from the department. You do have to maintain a minimum GPA and other eligibility requirements applicable to your specific program. So this would be during the semester before you go abroad. You do have to maintain 3.0 GPA or whatever GPA the program requires if it's higher. Some of you it might be higher. And you do need to make sure that you are maintaining good disciplinary action, that you don't have any sort of citations that happen during this semester before you go, because that can impact your ability to study abroad. Once your registration timetable opens, this is really important, please register in Gibson with the following CRN. And you can just search for this like you normally would when you register in Gibson. It does not have a limited number of seats, so please don't worry about not being able to get a seat in the course. Everybody that is approved to study abroad can register for this. But please write the CRN down. It's CRN 42932, and this is what you would search for in Gibson. And you do need to register by November 1st. And basically, this is important because it triggers disbursement of your financial aid, it triggers billing for your tuition, and it basically is a placeholder credit of 12 credit hour course that makes it appear that you are registered at Tulane. So it's really important for you guys to do that, and we will be sending reminder emails to let you know, but just please write this down and make sure that you register by November 1st. While you're abroad, you do need to register on-site for a full course load, and what that means depends on the program that you are attending. The minimum for Tulane is 12 credit hours because that's the minimum that you can be in order to be considered full-time. However, some programs do want you to have more credit hours enrolled while you're abroad. So, for example, some CIEE programs will ask that you're enrolled in at least 15 US credits. If that's the case, you have to be enrolled in 15, not 12. So basically, the general rule is that whatever is higher, whatever requirement is higher, ours or the program providers, is what you would stick to. Your grades will appear on your transcript as a letter grade, but will not factor into your Tulane GPA. We do this because we realize you're going to be studying in a new environment, perhaps in a new language or a new educational system. So we want to allow you a little bit of leeway to take those more challenging courses and adjust while you're abroad without worrying about tanking your GPA while you're abroad. And the SU policy being satisfactory and unsatisfactory does apply while you're abroad as well. You would just need to notify us by email within 10 weeks of the program start date, and then we would forward you to academic advising at that point to work out the details of SU. Upon your return, you'll want to keep syllabi, exams that you get back, papers, reading lists, any other course materials from abroad so that you can substantiate what you did while you were abroad. This is going to be really helpful as far as transferring credits towards a major or minor or a core credit, just because having that conversation about pre-approval before you go is very important. But obviously your professors will want to see some evidence of what you did while you were abroad in order to actually sign off on that credit when you return. So we advise that you keep all of that and just make sure if you are studying in a country where you're operating in another language, realize that you might have to do some translation. For example, if you're studying psychology, you're trying to get a psychology major credit and your major advisor does not speak Spanish, obviously you're going to have to do some translation of the syllabi in order to make that material useful. Again, courses are going to appear automatically as 5,000 level electives. And the course equivalency form, which is posted on our return students page, is what you would need to fill out upon your return with your advisors to finalize that major, minor, or core degree requirement approval, essentially. You do also need to complete the program evaluation, which we will send you towards the end of the semester in order to receive your grades from abroad. We'll be sending you reminders about that, but just keep that in mind. And then as far as incorporating new life skills into Tulane, when you get back, we have tons of events on campus. We have our peer advisor program. We have our SARC program where you can be basically an ambassador for a particular program when you get back. We have opportunities for students to get involved in info sessions, in running events at our global cafe, where you can meet international students and really network with the international community on campus. And we also have our magazine, The Global Observer, that students can contribute to if they want to publish pieces about their experience abroad. So lots of ways for you to incorporate those skills. And we also have resources online regarding careers abroad or going back if you want to do another semester. So those are all really helpful. Finances. So tuition, pretty simple. You pay as you pay now. You'll be billed by Tulane accounts receivable for tuition and the academic support fee. And that allows your scholarships and financial aid that you have to continue to apply while you are abroad. Again, this is why that 12 credit hour placeholder course that we mentioned is important, because that's what spurs all of this on. So that triggers disbursement of your aid, billing of your tuition. So again, make sure you register for that. You can meet with financial aid if necessary if you have questions about how your aid will apply while you're abroad, or you have questions about maybe looking at doing a budget adjustment given that you're going to have some increased expenses from, let's say, purchasing a flight. So you can meet with financial aid to discuss those things if necessary. They have appointments online that you can schedule. And please note that some Tulane rent programs will bill you directly for program housing or insurance. In general, when we're talking about housing, for most programs, you'll be billed directly by your host university or your program provider rather than Tulane. And that also applies in many cases for insurance. But for certain programs, again, Reunidas Madrid, Educo, University of Sydney, and BCSP Bologna, you'll actually be billed through accounts receivable for those things. So if you have any questions about that, if you're in one of those programs, just let us know. But again, in general, for housing and for other independent expenses like insurance, or if you have fees for a meal plan or for additional excursions that aren't included in the program costs, those are going to come to you from the provider directly. And again, you can meet with financial aid if you want to discuss this. In general, if you do have aid in excess of what your tuition cost is going to be, you can also use that to apply it to housing, even though it's not being billed through Tulane. And if you have questions, financial aid can answer those. Your health abroad. So knowing about the healthcare resources of your destination, what's available through your provider or your host university, is very important. So in general, if you have any kind of recurring medication that you're taking, you have a prescription for medication, or you have doctor services that you rely on a regular basis, you would really want to do the research now rather than while you're abroad or when you get abroad as to how you're going to access those things. So if you see a counselor, let's say, on a regular basis, you would want to do the research now to figure out what that is going to look like in your host environment. You also want to research local conditions that might complicate health issues that you already have. So for example, if you have asthma and you're going to go study in Beijing, obviously the air pollution there might complicate that. So what is that going to look like? What steps do you need to take to make sure that you're staying healthy in that environment? If you have Goldman Center accommodations, please notify our office and your program provider or host institution as soon as possible. Even if you don't think you're going to use your accommodations abroad, it's better to be transparent about that ahead of time and to let everyone know, so that if you do, in this new stressful environment, end up having to fall back on those accommodations that you don't normally use at Tulane, you have the option. If you wait until you are already abroad and wait until you're having a crisis to try to get these accommodations in place, oftentimes, depending on the host culture that you're in, it might be a lot more difficult. So really, it's a good idea to go ahead and notify us and the program provider about that now, even if you don't plan on using them abroad. You also want to plan a method to stay in touch with your physician and or identify an in-country physician if necessary, like we were talking about if you need to see someone on a regular basis. The best people to contact about that would be your host university or program provider, the staff on the ground that would know the best, if you want an English-speaking physician, if you're in a country where you don't speak the language, they would be the best ones to help you with finding the most viable option for you in that space. You also want to review methods on how to transport medication into a host country. This is particularly important if you take any kind of controlled substance, like an anti-anxiety medication or a pain medication, for example, because a lot of these medications that are FDA approved in the US are actually illegal in other countries. So ideally, you would want to figure out how you can take a supply for the entirety of the time you're going to be abroad with you. If that's not an option, if it's a controlled substance and you can't have more than, let's say, a 30-day supply, then you want to be really looking into how you're going to be able to access an equivalent medication, or how you're going to access a physician who can prescribe you a medication on site. And again, the best people to reach out to about that are going to be your provider or your host university. If you need help reaching out to them, we can always assist you with that. But in general, I would say it's a really good idea just to bring whatever medication you need with you. So for example, if you do one-a-day contacts, instead of trying to worry about finding an equivalent while you're in Argentina, you want to just bring with you what you need. So just bring with you a semester supply. This even applies to stuff like, birth control, applies to very simple things like Tylenol, or if you need Pepto-Bismol or an antacid. It's so much easier to just have what you need on hand than to have to find a pharmacy, find whatever the local equivalent of that drug is, and hope that it works for you in the same way as what you have at home. Even very simple things like if you take, let's say, St. John's wort here, that's actually illegal in certain places. If you wanted to take St. John's wort in Ireland, you can't purchase it. So it's always best to just bring whatever you need with you, and if you can't bring an advanced supply, do figure out how you're going to navigate that and how you're going to navigate different perspectives on health and wellness abroad. Health insurance. So you are required to demonstrate health insurance both domestically and internationally while you're studying abroad. And why we have you do this is, for example, if you were to be grievously injured while you're abroad, more than likely you would want to come home to the U.S. to where your guardians or where your family is to receive treatment, where you're familiar with the system. So we would want you to be insured in the case of that. So you do need to maintain whatever domestic insurance you have, but you also need to have international insurance while you're studying abroad. So basically for this, there are three options, one being insurance through your program provider. So for example, if you're studying abroad through CIEE or University of Sydney, you have insurance as a part of your program. It might be a certain type of insurance that you need to have in order to get a visa, which is the case for many programs in Australia. It might be a type of insurance that's just included in the program fee. So for CIE, this is INEX insurance that you're automatically enrolled in when you're on a CIE program. So you'd want to check to see if you already have insurance set up through the program, which can be the case for many of you. You can also research options through your domestic provider, or if you have T-SHIP insurance, you can look at international options through that. So if you have United or Blue Cross Blue Shield, anything like that, you can see what international options they have by calling your provider. And if neither of those are going to be an option for you, you don't want to look into those, or even if you want supplemental coverage, you can also purchase GeoBlue, which is an international insurance through Blue Cross Blue Shield. Typically, it's about $250 a semester, so it's pretty cost effective. For some programs, you are going to be required to have GeoBlue. So for example, like Educo and Madrid programs through Unidas, you'll have this automatically. But for some of you, it might just be something you want to purchase as your primary or as a supplemental insurance. And if you do want to do that, there are instructions on how to purchase GeoBlue in the health insurance signature document of your online application. And right here is the school code, which you would use to purchase it. So go ahead and write that down, or you can always come back to this page. The most important thing on this slide is to remember to complete the annual Tulane Health Waiver. So this is an email that's sent to you by Health Services, typically over the summer. And basically what it indicates is that you need in this email to either register for T-SHIP insurance, or opt out and indicate that you have domestic insurance. So you respond to this every year, but just really make sure that you're paying attention and looking out for this email. Don't think it doesn't apply to you because you're going abroad. It does. If you forget to opt out of T-SHIP insurance, they do automatically enroll you in it, and it's very difficult to opt out once they've already registered you, and it is fairly expensive. So you want to make sure that you're looking out for that through your Tulane email. Make sure that you're checking your Tulane email and that you're responding to this just like you normally would. Safety and security. So this is a really easy thing to do that just gives you a little extra security while you're abroad. It's very low maintenance on your end. So this is the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program through travel.state.gov. Travel.state.gov is a really good place to go just for general information about your destination, for travel warnings, all that kind of stuff. But this app that you can enroll in basically just lets embassies in the location you're going to be know where you are through the U.S. Department of State. It also gives you alerts that are relevant to your location. So for example, if you're in Paris and there's a metro strike and it's going to be dangerous to go in certain areas, or certain lines of the metro are going to be closed because of the strike, this would let you know. So it's just a really good tool to have, and it takes very little effort for you to download. Another sort of tool that you have in your safety kit while you're abroad is Global Rescue, and this is something that you're automatically enrolled in when you're on a Tulane approved program. Global Rescue is an emergency evacuation service that we contract with. So basically what that means is that in the case of a natural disaster or political upheaval in the location where you are studying abroad, Global Rescue has trained special ops teams that would assist in evacuating you or relocating you to a safer place, or in the case of a medical emergency, to your home hospital of choice. They also have more or less intense features, I guess you could say. They have a breadcrumbs feature that lets you drop pins if you're traveling on a weekend and you want people to know where you are. You can drop pins occasionally so they can follow where you are on a map. They also have local 911s pre-programmed into this app. So obviously, if you're in Ireland and you dial 911, no one is coming. So you do need to know what the local emergency services contact is. If you can't remember it in a moment of crisis, it's on the app. They have a panic button that you can press. They also have medical advice services. So if you need a second opinion, if you're injured while you're abroad and you want a second opinion from a doctor in the US, they have an English-speaking physician on the phone 24/7 that you can correspond with. So that's a really useful feature. You're automatically enrolled in this, but you do need to download the app. It's called the Grid mobile app. It's a black square with a white cross on it. So just go ahead and download that. Very useful features. It also gives you alerts like the STEP program. So I would also encourage you guys to just tell your parents or your guardians about these tools. Anybody that's worried about you when you're going abroad, just let them know that you have these tools in place just for their well-being or their peace of mind as well as yours. Discipline. So you are required to comply with both Tulane rules and regulations, which includes student conduct and honor codes, but you're also required to comply with provider or host university rules while you're abroad. Any violations of either of these policies while you're abroad will be reviewed by the Newcomb Tulane College Dean's Office upon your return. So unfortunately, what happens abroad does not stay abroad. Just please be cognizant that you're obeying all of these regulations while you're abroad and really representing Tulane in a positive light while you're in a foreign country. Local laws. So locked up abroad has happened before to Tulane students on abroad programs, unfortunately. And most of the time it's not because students are, engaged in some kind of high stakes jewel heist or anything while they're abroad. It's normally because they're just not aware of local laws. And unfortunately, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. And just not being aware of the legal system that you're entering can result in a lot of unsavory things. And really the intervention that our office can have if a student is arrested and locked up while abroad is minimal. Essentially it would be to contact the U.S. Embassy in that region and your parent or guardian in that order. We can't bail you out. We can't assist in any way with legal services, anything like that. You're really on your own at that point. So really not a great situation to be in, and one that's best avoided. And the best way to do that is just to be aware of the legal system that you're going into. So for example, carrying a small knife, like a Swiss Army knife might not be objectionable in a lot of places in the US. But if you're walking around with a knife in Ireland and you don't have a reason linked directly to a trade, so if you don't have a job-related reason to be carrying a knife, you can actually spend up to 10 years in jail for that offense. So things that we just wouldn't be aware of like that. Open containers is another one that can affect students that are in New Orleans. They're used to walking around in the street with, an open container. That's not legal in many places. Or public intoxication, that kind of thing. So please just be aware of local laws and try to avoid this if at all possible. Logistics. So your passport needs to be valid for at least 6 months after your study abroad program ends. So if your passport is going to expire, it has expired, or you don't have a passport at this point, please go ahead and make appointments to renew it or to obtain a passport as soon as possible. If it's not valid for at least 6 months after your study abroad program ends, you can experience issues returning to the U.S., which you don't want to have happen. So just go ahead and make sure that that's all taken care of before you go. And the reason that you would want to do that as soon as possible would be that applying for a visa can be, in many cases, a long and bureaucratic process. And applying for a visa is your responsibility because of how many countries we send students to and the fact that visa regulations are very specific and are changing all the time. We unfortunately do not have the capacity to advise students on how to obtain a visa for each country that they're visiting. So you need to start researching that information as soon as possible. You can do that by visiting the website of the consulate for the country that you're going to be visiting, or travel.state.gov would be a good place to start. In general, you'll receive some sort of a rough outline of how to apply from your host university or provider, but in many cases it's really going to be an independent endeavor for you to apply for a visa. So just make sure that you're reading all application requirements very carefully, that you are paying attention to deadlines, because we can intervene very little in regards to applying for a visa. Finances and budgeting. You do want to create a budget before you go abroad. Obviously, it's a very exciting time. You want to experience all these different things, try new foods, travel on the weekends, but that can add up very quickly. So you want to make sure you just have an idea of how much you have to spend while you're abroad. We do have tools on creating a budget on our website and learning about exchange rates. On our finances page, we have a cost of living comparison chart that lets you know the difference between cost of living in New Orleans and the locations that we have programs in. So I would recommend looking at that. You also want to ask yourself now, how will you access money abroad? Are you going to bring cash? Are you going to withdraw from an ATM? If so, does your bank in the U.S. have a partnership with a foreign bank so that you can avoid foreign transaction fees every time you're going to an ATM, because that can really add up. So this is a really important question to ask. Just for example, I went to China very recently, and I didn't realize that most Chinese people pay for everything with an app called WeChat. And you can't fill up WeChat with money unless you have a Chinese bank account. So unfortunately, I was in sort of a rough spot with trying to access money. I had to basically use cash everywhere, and there were very few ATMs that would take my card. Credit cards did not work in many places if they were from the US, so a situation that you would want to avoid. So just make sure you know how you're going to access cash and how you're going to handle money while you're abroad. Travel arrangements. So obviously booking the flight is very exciting, but you do need to think a little bit beyond that before you go. So determine how you're going to get from the airport into the city. Look at different options that you have, different pricing models. So, are you going to try to navigate the subway system? In many airports internationally, you might have the option of taking a metro or a subway into the city. Are you going to try to navigate that because it'll be cheaper, or are you going to be tired and you want to take a cab? If so, how much is that going to cost? Are you going to need cash on hand to pay for that, or a card? Just determining how you're going to get from point A to point B, ideally before you get to the airport and you're very jet lagged and tired and don't have the mental energy to figure it out. You also want to determine where you're going. Are you meeting somebody at the airport? If so, where are you going to meet them? Are you going directly to an address in the city? If so, write down the address and not in your phone. Write it down on a piece of paper, ideally in English and in the language of the host country if you need to show it to somebody in a cab. And just write it down, I would recommend, because you know, you might get to the airport and the SIM card that you purchased doesn't work right away. You know, you don't have Wi-Fi in the airport, so you can't access your phone the way you want to, or you know, your phone died while you were on the long flight and now you don't have anywhere to charge it, you have to go. So writing down the address is a really good idea. So these are some of the identity-based sessions that we offer, and we do have resources for all of these sessions online. So if you want to look through the resources, you can. For LGBTQ and allies, some things that we consider within the presentation are adjusting to life in your host country, putting your home identity into context abroad. We also look at some case study situations. So, for example, what is it like to be an asexual individual operating in a language that is inherently gendered? And some things that we generally discuss, again, are those example scenarios, how to do research based on country, region, and city, and then how and where to do that research. So there's some really good resources on this page online, and all the slides from that presentation if you want to check that out. Exploring your identity abroad. Some things that are considered within this session are individual challenges that students might face while studying abroad as a cause of their own identity markers, how perception changes based on location, and different inherent perceptions within that location, how your experiences will differ from those of your peers, and just really thinking about your identity markers ahead of time and how those will affect you in context. Living like a local is another page that we have. This will kind of take you through considering housing arrangements, like a homestay versus independent student housing, what program type you want to go through, what do you know about your host country, ways to get immersed in language and culture before you go, and then goals to maximize your engagement within that local community during your time abroad. Health, safety, and risk is sort of an expansion on some of the topics that we discussed within this presentation, but basically considering how to manage your physical and mental health abroad, and comparing different international perspectives on medicine, health, and well-being. And some things that are discussed within this presentation, within these resources that we have for you online, are mitigating high-risk situations, how your host country views treatment for physical and mental health illnesses, which may differ dramatically from the U.S. perspective, building a toolkit for yourself, and then responding in the event of an emergency. Language hacks is another session we have, basically reflecting on personal learning styles, and how they relate to language acquisition and practice, identifying effective communication methods, and developing techniques to learn, use, and retain your target language. That's Weird, Language Stereotypes and Social Media and International Experiences discusses how we can use descriptive languages to contextualize or describe new experiences, considering how stereotypes can impact those experiences, and then thinking about how we portray or envision our experiences on social media and create sort of a vision of that experience to our audience that we've cultivated. Culture and conflict, understanding and managing conflict situations abroad. This is understanding how personal and cultural differences can contribute to conflict, identifying personal conflict management strategies, and then identifying when it may be appropriate to use those strategies for resolving conflict. Some additional resources we have on campus for you. Global Cafe is an event that we have every Tuesday from 2 to 4 in the mezzanine of the LBC. Basically, it's just a coffee hour or two where we get together with international students. It's a really good time to network with return study abroad students, international students, faculty, and language and culture departments on campus. And we do have free coffee and cookies every week. Sometimes we have themed events for Lunar New Year or pumpkin carving for Halloween. We have mass decorating for Mardi Gras. So it's just a really good event for really putting into context your experience abroad when you return and cultivating that international community on Tulane's campus. Our Study Abroad Fair is on October 16th this year. This is really an opportunity for you to just talk and network with program providers from all around the world, as well as departments on campus that offer programs or that are a part of the international education community on Tulane's campus. So this year, this is going to be October 16th from 2 to 5 in the LBC. Typically, it's going to be middle of October for the Study Abroad Fair. It's during International Education Week, which this week is the 14th to the 18th. So we'll have a lot of internationally themed events going on then, and you can learn more about this on our website. You can also contact return students from your program. Our SARC, or Study Abroad Fraternity Contact Program, is a great way to do this. These are all Tulane students who are acting as ambassadors for programs that they've been on previously and have returned from. So they have lots of great information. We also have peer advisors in our office that serve a similar purpose, and you can also make appointments with them directly. And you can learn more about them on our website as well. Thank you all for listening. That's going to wrap it up for this presentation. If you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us at our email, which is osa@tulane.edu. We also have a phone number that you can call, which is 504-865-5339. Again, please do look over the resources that are available to you for identity-based sessions that have been posted on our website. We'll also be sending out an email that has more information on how to access those. But please do look over some of those identity-based resources because they'll really help contextualize what your abroad experience is going to be like on a more individual level than this presentation addresses. Again, if you do have any questions, please let us know. But I hope that you all have a safe and amazing semester abroad or an amazing year abroad. And again, please let us know if you need anything additional.